So, in a perfect world, all children would have the same opportunities. But many times this isn't the case. The reality is that single parenting has been growing exponentially over the years. And I'm sure that at some point of our lives, we've all met someone who's had an unstable home life. Many times these people grow up and develop mental illnesses or behavior problems or have emotional problems. And the most common reason why is because they grew up in a single parent household. So if you're a single parent or you know someone who is, then this might be of help to you. Now, the reason why I chose to speak about single parenting is because I've always felt passionate about this topic. It's always been something I've been interested in, and I've done research papers, presentations about this topic ever since high school. So it all really comes down to the fact that I love children, and this is just something I really love learning about. So through this speech, I want to help shed light on the emotional and behavioral problems that come from single parenting. I want to help the audience understand that identify these problems early on to prevent them from becoming habitual. This can lead to an increase of high school graduates and help them become more financially secure in their lives. So let's start off by identifying the different types of single parenting, because believe it or not, there are types and each affect the child differently. So according to the U.S. Census Bureau, from 1960 to 2016, the percentage of children living with both parents have decreased from 88% to 69%. As many of you know, our parents have shaped our lives. Either we have unconsciously emulated their example or we have purposely deferred from it. And because of this, we can all agree that parents have a huge impact on a growing child. So children who do end up growing up in a single parent household or do have an unstable home life tend to unintentionally continue the same lifestyle. Therefore, it is important for us to know and understand why and how this affects children. We might not be able to solve the problem, but we can help them, and we can help others understand that separation from a parent in any way can affect them, no matter how mature the parent thinks they are. So the first type and the most common type is divorced households. So teens in these situations tend to become more independent. An author from Psychology Today says, the adolescent can act aggressively to take control of his life by behaving even more defiantly, more determined to live his life his way, more dedicated to his self-interest than before. Adolescents are going through puberty and are on the road to self-discovery. So when a chain is broken, they do whatever they can to detach themselves from the situation. And of course, many of them take this as an excuse to misbehave. And they justify themselves by saying, if they can put themselves first, then so can I. And so this obviously affects their performance in school. There might be a sudden drop of grades or an increase of phone calls home. And I think we can all agree that teens make rash decisions. They make these rash decisions to fill in voids in their lives, and so they do whatever they can to remove themselves from the problem. Now, while many act violently towards others in their behavior, many act violently towards themselves. Many times, kids in these situations shift the blame towards themselves, and they become really depressed about these situations. And depression is a real thing. It's more than feeling sad. It's an everyday struggle that they have to deal with. Now, this is the case for teens, but in children, in small children, it's really different. Rather than becoming independent, they become more dependent. This is because they become very anxious in these situations. When their parents divorce, they really have no idea what's happening. They just see their parents being separated and they don't understand why. And because they're so young, they have many questions running through their minds, because what was once a united family is now a broken one. Now, the second type are never married households. Now, single parents in these situations have a lot of financial problems because in divorced households, they start off with two incomes. So it's easier to ease in to the one income, but when they were never married, they only started off with one income. So they had to continue as one. And having an unexpected child without the help of the other parent is really difficult. Many times this happens in teens. 3 in 10 American girls become pregnant before the age of 20. These teenagers who don't even have a completed educated background have to now deal with a kid. And it's not the kid's fault, but because they're there, they have to worry about financial problems and things that they could have delayed. And of course, grandparents of the baby help out where they can, but there's not much that they can do because they have to let the mother take responsibility for her actions. And eventually, the teen mother becomes old enough and eventually moves out of their home. Now, this happened to a friend of mine back in Houston. She turned 16 a month after giving birth to a baby boy. And as endearing as he may be, he was a burden. And her mother helped out where she could, but she had 4 other kids to worry about. My friend ended up moving out and dropping out of high school. Now she's 18 and is struggling to make ends meet for her baby. And interestingly enough, she never knew her dad. Her mother was 18 when she was pregnant with her and when she gave birth to her. 3 years later, her mother ended up getting married and had 3 kids. She ended up divorcing that guy and now has another baby boy with her boyfriend. So you can really see through this situation that these types of cycles are really hard to break when they begin. And now the third household are widowed parents. So kids in these situations are half as likely to drop out than kids in other situations. And this is because widowers or widows wasn't a willing separation, or and it isn't like a void like in never married households. And this doesn't really save them from the normal effects like the emotional and behavioral problems that come behind it. Most of the time, kids in these situations who lose a parent develop anxiety or depression because losing somebody important is really hard. And so all 3 types have commonalities, and the most common factor, the most common problem are financial problems. So as a kid is growing up, there are many things that they want and there's many things that they need. And as parents, they do whatever they can to provide for those wants and needs. But for a single parent, this is much harder because they only have one income, and usually this income goes towards their household or their food or things that they need rather than wants. Now, because of this, kids have to miss out on things that their friends are participating in. And it might not seem like much, but to the kid, it's a lot. They're seeing their friends participate in extracurriculars that they can't participate in because of their financial situation. And so this can lead them to becoming less social and more irritated with their situation because no kid likes being strained by money. And so when they're strained by money, they start comparing themselves to other kids who don't have to worry as much. And when these comparisons start, this is when depression, anger, anxiety settle into their minds. And so also single parents are really busy. They are juggling their house, their bills, their jobs, and trying to deal with their kid too. So it's really hard for them to make time for their kid, and when their kid sees this, they might not feel motivated to talk to them about how they're feeling about the situation. So what can we do about this? Kids, teenagers, we all need stability in our lives. And so it's important for us to show them in small ways, show them that we are there for them and they can rely on us. It's important for us to make it clear to them that they are loved, because when a kid feels unloved, they begin to feel lonely and they don't know where to look. And it's also important for us to communicate with them and explain to them exactly how the situation is, because honesty is the best policy. If they know and understand what's happening, they don't have as much questions and they understand why things are happening. And it's also important for us to stay involved. They need to feel like you're there for them, because really what they need is to be listened to. And the last one is the most important one, is to let them feel disappointed, because teenagers and children are all human. We're all humans, just as adults are. And many times as bystanders, We might be a friend or a teacher or just a neighbor, but it's important for us to help them understand that we're there for them also, because it's easier for them to talk to somebody who's outside of the situation, who doesn't know exactly what's happening, because it's just easier to have them listen and to, yikes, okay. It's easier for them to complain to somebody who isn't their mother or father, because they already know that their mom and dad have burdens and they don't want to end up adding more to it. So help them understand that you're there for them and be reliable for them as a bystander, friend, or neighbor. So even with these conclusions, this is not to say that single parenting is bad. Sometimes this is just how life is presented to us, and we need to learn how to deal with it. Nonetheless, children need stability, and they need their parents to be there for them. And whether it only be a mother or father, it's important for us to be there. Now, this is because parents are our foundation. Children are looking at their parents as examples, and so when the example is unstable, they don't know what else to do. So we need to learn how to deal with these obstacles and help those in these situations to ensure that every child has the same opportunities.